All right, God bless everybody. Great to see you. Today the topic is the miraculous attitude of gratitude. Have you ever wanted to see more signs, miracles, and wonders than you do right now? Have you ever wanted to have your physical needs supplied in miraculous ways? Have you ever wanted to consistently do the amazing works of Jesus Christ? Well, you're not alone. The apostles had performed miracles when they were with Jesus, and they'd done signs and wonders when they were away from Him. They were amazing people, probably why He chose them in the first place, but something was a little off. Jesus spotted a chink in their armor, pointed out their Achilles heel, and showed them their vulnerability, their kryptonite. The reason for their inconsistent abundance, both spiritually and physically, stemmed from a problem Jesus terms as a hard heart. Now, as we discover the cure for this thing Jesus called a hard heart, we will uncover our ability to do more of the miraculous and notice more of the abundance that God has placed right in front of us than we ever have before. Simply put, as we remember to maintain an attitude of gratitude, our hearts will be prepared for the miraculous. So, what is heart? The word heart in the Greek is not the physical organ in our chest that pumps blood throughout our body, but it's equally important. The word heart is more of a magnet or a sponge than a pump. It absorbs belief, it draws identity closer, and it attracts abundance or failure. Your heart makes you who you are and attracts you to all that you are able to attracts to you all that you're able to absorb. So what is a hard heart? The word hard. The Greek word for hard is the term hard heart. It's very interesting. It's a word that means something that has become non-porous. It's become non-porous. It's been hardened over time like petrified wood, like a calloused hand, or if you have vision that's slowly taken away because of a cataract. Hard is desensitizing. Hard is lost feelings. Hard cannot absorb. It cannot attract anymore. Hard is hard. Petrification is a geologic process that makes exact replicas of the original specimen, similar down to the microscopic level, yet it's turned from organic to inorganic. It has become hard as a rock. The hardening of one's heart is a process. It takes habitual repetition to callous or to petrify a heart. So this is a lifestyle, folks. So now a heart check. Now, in order to grasp the lesson of reversing the effects of a hard heart, let's get a running start. And I'm going to be moving through these three Gospels at a fast clip to build this lesson. Mark 6, chapter 1, you can turn if you want to, or just listen. Mark 6, 1 through 6 tells us that Jesus' town and his immediate family, mom, brothers, sisters, rejects and dishonored him. He marveled at their unbelief and their hard hearts that they had. Verses 7 through 13 mention that Jesus sent out the 12 two by two to learn three things. One was to expect the miraculous. Two was to expect that God will supply all their physical need, always. And three, to avoid people who don't believe in you or your cause. And those are the three main lessons the apostles learned when they went out two by two. And so verse 14 through 29 tells us that King Herod now murders John the Baptist, the cousin of Jesus. Now remember, this is all a lead up to this hard-hearted teaching. Verse 30 says the apostles returned, and they returned very excited from their personal training and wanted to share their learning, only to learn about John the Baptist being murdered. What a time to return. You know, and verse 31 through 34, now Jesus wanted to take his men to a secluded place. They needed a getaway. Now I'm going to read Mark 6, 31 through 33. And he said unto them, Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest for a while, for there are many coming and going, and they had no leisure so much as to eat. And they departed into a desert place by ship privately. And the people saw them departing, and many knew him, and ran afoot thither out of all cities, and outwent them, and came thither unto them. Now I want to point out speed here. Thousands of people wanted them, watched them leave in a boat, and they jogged along the shore as the apostles rowed on in their boat, and they kept pace with that boat, and they stuck with it until Jesus and the disciples decided to stop and really deal with the crowd. Now a slow run with a large mixed group would be at a 4 or 5 mile per hour pace, which is a 12 to 15 minute mile. And this was the pace of a boat being rowed by the apostles. And this is going to be useful information in just a little bit. So they were rowing about a 12 to 15 minute mile. A very fast walk, a really slow jog. And when they got out of the boat, there was a crowd of maybe 15,000 people. There was 5,000 men and their families. And Jesus felt sympathy for them, even though he was the one who had lost his cousin. Now, some of them had come because they felt sorry for him. Most of them came because they wanted to see miracles. Now, Matthew 14 mentions that all the apostles suggested Jesus to send the people away so they could go buy themselves some food. It was a logical answer. We would probably say the same thing, but it wasn't the answer Jesus was looking for. It wasn't what they just learned on their little Apostle Junior training program. In John 6, Jesus does a heart check. Jesus turns to the Apostle Peter, he turns to the Apostle Philip and asks him, and him alone, how he would handle the food situation. Philip, how are we going to do it? How are we going to do this? And this next section has some words that are super important to this lesson. And it's going to help us detect and show us how to reverse the effects of a hard heart so that we can see the miraculous more consistently. Wouldn't you like to see the miraculous more consistently in your finances, in yourself physically, or just to help somebody else? Sure. John chapter 6, we're going to read 6 through 9. And he said to prove him. Now, when I say a word differently, it means I'm highlighting it, okay? And he said this to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 pennies worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, there's a lad here that hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, but what are they amongst so many? So, I know that sounded weird, so I won't do it again. The fact that Philip was asked about the money may have meant that he was handling the money at this time. You know, maybe he was the road manager on that trip. Now, we know that Judas handled the money later on in the Gospels, right? But right now, he's the money guy. So here I'm going to go over these words. Prove. Prove is to test or to give a heart check for hardness level. For you machinists, it might be like the Rockwell hardness test. You can tell how hard a piece of metal is. You see, with the Rockwell. If you buy steel, you'll know what that means. The hardness. And then here's the next one. He himself knew what he would do. This is important. Jesus knew what he was going to do. Jesus had a plan to help them through the hard-heartedness. Wait till you see what he went through with this plan. Next, 200 pennies worth. Philip said there was 200 pennies worth of bread. Now, that's the amount of money a minimum wage worker would earn in a year. So that's about how you can sort of picture how much that would be. And the Expositor's Greek Testament says it's the amount of money it would take to feed 2,000 people each one meal. And there were 15,000 people here. That's why Philip said there would just be a tiny, it'd be like a pinch of bread that they would get if they went and bought 200 pennies worth. So now, it's not sufficient for them. It shows Philip's hard-heartedness level, his spiritual Rockwell test. You see, it was average. It wasn't miraculous. It was not abundant. It was not sufficient for them. Now, a lot of us would say that. I don't have enough money to go on that trip. I don't have enough money to do this. I don't have enough money to feed the whole neighborhood if we invite all them. You know, we would say stuff like that, right? You know, I'm only going to invite these people because that's all I can afford. Well, that's not what Jesus wanted to hear. Now, what are they among so many is the next word. And that shows Andrew's heart hardness level. Okay? What are they among so many? What are just a few loaves amongst all these people? So now you're seeing where the minds of all the apostles thought the same way. They said, send them off. We can't afford them. Send them to town. It was logical. Philip sputtered. He thought like most people. Andrew sputtered. Andrew stuttered. You know, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't miraculous thinking. Now we're talking about miraculous thinking. I'm going to show you a couple of tricks at the end of this teaching that are so simple, and if you do them, you will begin to see the miraculous happen more often. So did you notice how Andrew, Peter's brother, almost figured it out? He almost came up with the abundant, godly solution, but then he quits. He gives up. He goes back to his old way of thinking when he says, what are they among so many? Now, Andrew and Philip verbalized the heart set of the apostles. Their hearts were set on average. They were just set to average, not to abundance, not to the miraculous. See, remember, your heart is your belief system, your identity, and our words are the warning lights of our heart. Our words expose our true beliefs and our true unbeliefs. Your words expose your identity. Concerning words that pop out of your mouth, success coach Jen Sincero wrote, quote, if you're broke or not where you want to be financially, you can be sure that your language could use an upgrade, end of quote. Now, I would say the same thing is true with the miraculous. Do you ever hear yourself saying any of these limiting, heart-hardening phrases? Now, here are 8 of her observations. I want is another way of saying, I lack. I wish is another way of saying, I'm not in control, which is disempowering. I need is another way of saying, I lack. I can't is self-explanatory. I'm trying implies that you are not committed. I hope implies that it might or might not happen, which shows that you lack faith. I should implies that you won't or don't want to. I don't know slams the door shut on finding out. Now, I like those. If you hear yourself repeatedly asking God for the same thing over and over, the same way, with any of the above words, it could be an indicator that something is amiss in your heart. It might be petrified or beginning. Isn't that what the world tries to do? It tries to harden your heart. Because if your heart is hardened, you can't absorb what God wants to show you. That's why children are so great at believing. Because they haven't been hardened by the world. The cure to a hard heart is typically gratefulness. Repeatedly remembering the good is a cure to a hard heart. Remembering miracles over and over and over again is a cure to a hard heart. John 6:6 lays out an important point. Now, Jesus already knew how he was going to handle things. He was just looking for heart. He was looking for heart with the apostles. I think Jesus had the entire next 24 hours mapped out in his head and in his heart. Watch. And the people were all unprepared physically. The apostles were unprepared spiritually, but Jesus was ready for anything. He wanted to show his trainees how they would handle the situation. He wanted to see how his trainees would handle the situation. This was a heart check, folks. This whole section is a heart check. It'll work for us too. Mark 6:36 and 37 says, it tells us that Jesus had challenged Philip and the apostles to think of a way to feed the crowd. They made excuses and thought with their heads and not their hearts. They said, send them away. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough food for everyone. Now, didn't they just learn? This was lesson 2 on their junior apostle training program. You know, it was God will supply your physical need. Remember, they had to go out with nothing? Okay? They know how to do it. They learned how to do it, but now they haven't remembered that simple lesson that they did. In Mark 6:40, Jesus asked the 15,000 people to sit on the green grass in manageable groups of 50s or 100s. Now, here's a side note. Travelers usually carried a little food with them because there wasn't fast food. You know, but this group left their homes and their businesses so quickly they left empty-handed. Typically, people carried a small woven bag or basket about the size of a small backpack, and it would hold about 2 gallons worth of food and supplies, similar to those shopping bags like this one right here. I'm holding up like a Walmart shopping bag, and I have 2 gallons of water in it. See, these bags they're 2-gallon bags. That's about the size of the bag that all people in Israel would carry when they traveled. It's the kind you carry home from the grocery store, okay? Now, they didn't have plastic bags. They were woven bags. And sometimes they were designed to have a strap to carry on the shoulder or 2 straps to carry as a backpack. Everybody had one, including the apostles. You would not leave home without it. It's just a common thing. You'd throw in your food for lunch. I mean, how many of you go to work without your lunch? Most of us don't, unless you buy your lunch, right? So this bag could be carried, you know, I just said that. So each of the apostles would have had one of these in the boat. Okay? They would have had it. It was just normal. They would have had one of these baskets. They're called baskets in here. Okay? I'll call them a bag because it makes a little more sense to us. We think of a basket as an open top. Well, nobody would walk around all day with an open top basket with their sandwich and apple, right? It'd be hard to do. You'd carry it in a little bag, like a woman's purse kind of thing. So John 6:41 says that Jesus gave thanks to God and divided the food up to each of the 12 apostles who might have carried it around in their baskets or their backpacks. I don't know. Maybe it was in their hand. Maybe they had it in their little. Maybe he just threw it in each of their little backpacks, their little bag. You see, Matthew 14:17 and 21 says that Jesus and the disciples fed 5,000 families with 5 loaves and 2 small fishes. 5 plus 2 means what? 7. Okay, I'm not going to say any more about that yet. You see, that's about 15,000 people they fed with that much. As fast as they could pull it out of their go bags, you know, it would just reappear. I mean, you know, that's 15,000 movements, 15,000 people to hand this to, or you hand it to the head of the family and they distribute it. I don't know. You see? And more would appear until everyone was fed and the bags were empty, or they had nothing left in their hands. So it was all gone. All 5 loaves and all 2 fish were gone, but that fed 15,000 people and filled them up. So would you say that's miraculous? Would you remember that? I mean, would you hang on to that lesson for a long time? Probably. Probably. John 6:12 through 13 says, when they were filled, he said unto his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Jesus was a little bit cheap. Therefore they gathered them together and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of those 5 barley loaves which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. The 12 baskets in this record are those small 2-gallon grocery store size bags, or those that were like a woven backpack. Okay? That's sort of what they were like a kid might carry to school size. And these 12 baskets were probably the apostles' very own lunch backpacks, in that no one else brought theirs except for one kid. So where would the 12 things have come from? So they went around and collected from all those 15,000 people 12 backpacks full of stuff, full of fragments. Now, if you think about it, filling up 12 little Walmart bags with leftovers is really not all that much if you're cleaning up after 15,000 people. If you divide that 15,000 by 12, it comes out to, I think, like $1,250 people that each apostle would have had to clean up after. I mean, that's like going to the World Arena afterwards and picking up all that junk. You think you get more than 12 baskets full in there? Yeah. So you know how messy people are. You know, so and it holds about 9,000 at the World Arena here in Colorado Springs. Okay, so this is more than that. This is almost a third. This is a half again more of people. So there's a lot of people. Okay, 12 basketful. It's cool, but it's not crazy abundance. But now we're going to see why. Here, Jesus and God are so freaking cool. Now they have their little backpack full of bread. Why? Why? Were they going to give it back to the people? I don't think so. So Matthew 14:23, evening came and Jesus sent the disciples away in a boat. And they didn't really want to leave them, but Jesus constrained them to leave. Go, guys. No, I don't want to go. Go, guys. We don't want to leave you, Master. Go. Come on, go. Do what I've told you to do. And you know, remember, Jesus has a plan here. Now, John 6:15 says, Jesus perceived the people that he just fed were going to take him by force and try to force him to be their king. So he sent him home, and he hightailed it up into a hill. Okay? And Jesus, Matthew 14:23, Jesus went up on a hill to pray and to watch the apostles row out to a designated spot on the lake. And this is going to be new stuff to you. You see, you're going to see what I'm talking about in just a minute. They stayed in a holding pattern 2 or 3 miles out from shore. And you can read that in John chapter 6. So Mark 6:48 and both John 6, they both say that from a hilltop, Jesus saw them toiling in rowing because of the high winds. Now, by the way, at 6 feet tall, you can see exactly 3 miles across the water. If you're on a hill, you can see more than double that. Jesus could have seen all the way across the lake from the hill. Now, plus all fishing boats would have had special fishermen's lanterns on them at night. It just is normal. It would have been just normal for them to have a lamp lit. So he would have been able to pick them out, because he asked them to go to a specific spot on the lake, and I can prove this. Have you ever wondered why trained fishermen, men who grew up on that lake and grew up in boats fishing, would have stayed out in the middle of a small lake all night, especially during a windstorm? Why on earth would they have done that? Remember how fast a boat could be rowed? Now this lake is 8 miles wide and 11 miles long. Okay? So at the widest, it's 8 miles. At the widest. And they weren't going end to end. They were on the side, cutting the corner. At the most, it was 8 miles. Matthew 14:25 says when it was the 4th watch of the night, that's between 3 and 6 a.m., they had been out there in the middle of the lake for maybe 6 hours. And out on the water for up to at least 8 hours. They'd been gone from shore for 8 hours or so by then. But they'd been in the middle for at least 6 hours. Why would a fisherman do that? Why on earth would they do that if he told them to go ahead of him? You see, now it was dependent on sundown, so I don't know the exact amount of time. I don't know exactly what time of year this was. See, Jesus had made sure that each of them had their individual lunch bags with them in case they got hungry. They're out rowing for 8 hours. So you think you would have appreciated having having your little lunch bag with you. See how God took care of them? Just gave them just enough food to have for 8 hours of work. Isn't that fun? It was all part of the Master's plan. If they'd rowed out at a slow walking pace, which is 3 miles an hour, which is a 20-minute mile, they could have easily rowed across this lake in 2.5 hours. In a little over an hour, they would have been to the middle. Why did they stay out there? Why did they stay in the middle all night? Watch this. John 6:17. And entered into a ship and went over the sea toward Capernaum, which was catty corner. And it was now dark, and Jesus was not come to them. And Jesus was not come to them. What were they expecting Jesus to do? Come to them. They were sitting there waiting for Jesus to come to them. Jesus was not yet come to them. I just saw this the other day and it blew my mind a little bit. The word not can be translated not yet, had not yet come to them. You see, the apostles had been waiting for Jesus in the middle of this lake, and he told them he was going to come to them. It was his plan that we learned about earlier. You see, they knew that if Jesus said he would meet them in the middle of the lake, that he would meet them in the middle of the lake, right? You see? So they waited, and they waited, and they waited for up to 10 hours in the middle of this lake. And because it was windy, they had to keep rowing to stay where he told them to be. And it would have been where a lot of other fishing boats weren't. That's why Jesus chose to sit atop that hill, to keep an eye on the boys while he prayed. And he was waiting for the perfect moment to teach them a perfect lesson. And now was that moment. Mark 6:48. And he saw them toiling and rowing, for the wind was contrary to them. And about the 4th watch of the night, he cometh unto them walking upon the sea, and would have passed by them. Now, Jesus was a cool dude. And these guys were tight, okay? They were buddies. They would sit around the campfire and tell jokes and fart, okay? I mean, these guys, these were buddies. They'd seen some stuff. Now, it was between 3 and 6 a.m. now. That's what the 4th watch of the night. It could have been the sun coming up. And he'd been waiting all night for the right time to spring this surprise lesson on them. But they were tired now. They were bored now. He even messes with them a little. He acted like he was taking a casual stroll and was going to walk right past them. The word would, W-O-U-L-D, is a Hebrewism which means he took great delight in. He took great pleasure in acting like he was going to walk right past them. Can you see Jesus whistling? trying to hold back a smile, and he acted like he was going to walk past them. And they're in that boat, and they're like, what? And mind you, it was very windy, and Jesus would have been soaking wet, his hair flapping in the breeze, his beard dripping and getting slung from one side to the next. He'd been walking up and down on the waves for possibly 3 miles. 2 to 3 miles it took him to walk out to that spot. So how long would that take him? We know it would take him less than an hour, half an hour, depending on the wind. Okay? Jesus knew how these guys were going to react. He was looking for a heart reaction, and he got one. He told them he was going to meet up with them in the middle, but he didn't tell them how he was going to get there. How do you think they thought he would get there?
Boat.
A boat! That's usually how you get across a lake. They thought he'd just hire somebody else, one of the other people, and because other people had boats too. Mark 6:49. And when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit and cried out, "Ah!" They all saw him. They were troubled, and immediately he talked to them. Talked them down, and saith unto them, "Be of good cheer, it's I. Be not afraid." They freaked. You know, they thought he was a devil spirit, and they all screamed like school children at recess. Ah! Can you see these hardened fishermen doing this? How funny would that have been to Jesus, and sad? You see, they had just dealt with and cast out spirits a few short days ago when they were on that self-study, self-directed 2x2 junior apostle training program. You see, they were expecting him to meet them in this very spot, but they had no idea he was going to walk on the water. Jesus probably knew how this was going to play out way back before he talked with Philip earlier. Matthew 14:28. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me to come unto thee on the water. And Jesus said, Come. And Peter was come down out of the ship, bump, and he stepped on that water like it was a moving sidewalk. And he walked on the water to go to Jesus. He starts walking. Jesus must have been hanging out there a little bit, okay? He wasn't right next to the ship, you know, getting splinters in his hands, okay? You know, and like a kid at the edge of the pool. That wasn't Jesus. That was Peter. He got off, he let go, you know, like the kid the first time they start swimming on their own, and he starts walking on that water. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid and beginning to sink. He was beginning to sink. He cried and said, Lord, save me! And immediately Jesus stretched out forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore or in what didst thou doubt? And doubt means to think twice. To think twice. You know, double think. You see, Peter, you were thinking so good. Why did you overlap good thoughts with negative or average thoughts? Why did you go back to what's normal? We're apostles, man. You see, what distracted you from the miraculous? And that was apostle training lesson 1. Believe in miracles. Expect miracles. This little faith, this doubt, this mental overlap is a telltale sign of a hard heart. Remember, a hard heart doesn't mean that you're mean. It just means you're stuck. It just means you're stuck, that you're set in your ways. That's all it means. A hard heart just means you're set in your ways. You're not open to receive anything new. If you have a hard heart, you cannot see the miraculous. If you have a hard heart, you cannot receive the abundance of God. That's all it means. John 6:21. Well, to add to that, so if you're not getting what you think you deserve, rest assured it's a hard heart somewhere. John 6:21. Then they willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at the land whither they went. This verse says that the second Jesus got into the boat, he threw Peter's soggy rear in there first, you see, and then Jesus climbed aboard because he had to step up and climb over the edge and get in, and immediately the ship was at the land whither they went. You see, it appeared on the shore of their intended destination. After being out all night, don't you think that would have been a relief? Yeah. Not to have to row another 3 more miles? Yeah. Their lunch baskets were empty by then. And soggy. Soggy bread. So Mark 6:51-52, and he went up unto them into the ship, and the wind ceased, and they were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure, and wondered, for they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. There's the 2 answers right there. They considered not. They didn't. If they had just gone back in their mind to what they had just done 10 hours ago, the miracles that they did, miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle, every piece of bread they handed out, and then it keeps appearing. They could have gotten through this situation. But it says, for their heart was hardened. That's why they could not remember the lesson. They'd all been out all night. Jesus walked to them on the water. Peter walked on the water. Peter needed help getting back into the ship. Jesus climbs aboard. The wind immediately stops and the boat's transported to the shore instantly. The word amaze means they went a little bit insane. They went a little bit insane. You ever driven a car off a cliff? You know what your mind does, you see? The word beyond measure. I had a boat that starts sinking on you. You know, I mean, just something really weird. You start sliding off of a house when you're doing construction work. It's spooky stuff. You go a little bit insane. And the word beyond measure means super abundantly. So they went crazy insane. They went full on bonkers. And the word wondered means they admired it too. Now, it's hard to understand that, but I remember standing in front of a pool hall with my long red hair baking in the hot Texas sun. And all of a sudden, this blue Chevy moving at maybe 60 miles an hour down this highway that cut through town, it turned too fast and it spun out of control and it started spinning and screeching in clockwise circles right toward me and my friends who were standing outside of this building. And there's a whole line of parked cars between us and this car. And it was just screeching and spinning and spinning. And we couldn't stop looking. We were transfixed. We were mesmerized. The Chevy, totally out of control, wildly spinning into this parking lot, spun into the one and only open parking space in front of this place. And then the car just stopped. Hollywood couldn't have planned it any better. The kid calmly turned off his car, got out, shut the door, straightened his shirt, never looked at us, and just walked into the pool hall like he had planned it that way all along. And we were dumbfounded, but laughing. I was amazed, frozen, shocked, but somehow I admired that kid, and I still do. The reason they momentarily lost their minds and couldn't handle the miracles because they were stacking up so much was because they had hard hearts. They'd seen many, 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 many miracles, but their hearts were too hard to absorb the lesson. Verse 52 of Mark 6, they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. The reason they maintained hard hearts and kept coming up short was because they had absolutely forgot to remember the miracle of the loaves and the fish that they had just participated in. If we want to see the miraculous more often, if we want to see our needs met more often, if we don't want to get freaked out by the goodness of God and the power of God, then we need to find a way to remember what He has already done for us and that we have already done for Him. The cure for a hard heart is constantly remembering the good. And this is the first of 2 times the Word explains this why they had petrified hearts. The reason their hearts are hard is because they didn't remember. They stopped remembering. They were used to doing things the old way. This is how my pappy did it. This is how my daddy did it. This is how my grandpappy did it. This is how I do it. Well, stupid. Don't be stupid. Do it the way Jesus did it if you want to walk with power. Want to do the works of Jesus Christ? Then think the way He thought. You think He thought twice when God said walk on the water? No. I would. I shouldn't. You see? And so this next record is going to revolve around the apostles feeding 4,000 families. And here's another heart-healthy lesson. Now, Jesus and the apostles, after this, had walked all the way to the Mediterranean and then back to the other side of Galilee, which is about a 100-mile round trip. He heals a Syrian woman's child. He actually gets rid of a spirit that had been in there. Then he gets confronted by these religious leaders. Then he completely heals a deaf and speechless man. You see, a crowd of about 12,000 people accumulate from far and wide, and they won't leave. In fact, they stayed with Jesus and the apostles for 3 days. Imagine somebody following you around for 3 days. Mark 8, 1 through 5, in those days the multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called His disciples unto Him and saith unto them, I have compassion on the multitude because they have now been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away fasting to their own houses, they will faint by the way, for divers or many of them come from afar. And His disciples answered Him, from whence can a man satisfy these men with bread here in the wilderness? This is two chapters from the last one. This is 2 chapters. Would you not remember what you just did like a week ago? And they go, where are we going to find in the wilderness enough food to satisfy all these people? And he asked them, how many loaves do you guys have? And they said, 7. Probably Philip, who might have been, keeping track of he was the road gear guy. You see, here we go again. This time the apostles actually brought 7 small, round, flat loaves of bread with them. And Jesus, he broke the bread, he handed it to the apostles like this time, and they passed it out to about 12,000 people. And food kept appearing as he handed it out, just like last time. It's identical. And Mark 8:8-9, it says, and so they did eat and were filled, and they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 baskets. And they that had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away. The word filled in this usage is gorged. You ever been gorged like Thanksgiving? You know what I mean? You can't eat anymore. There is no more room. You will explode. It will get messy. There's no room. That's what 12,000 people were. Okay? The people were stuffed. Their bellies are sticking out. The apostles collected 7 baskets of leftover. It was how many the last time? 12, right? Now the only difference was these were not backpack-sized lunch baskets. It's another Greek word. These were woven rope utility baskets that workers or fishermen used to carry heavy loads. In fact, this is the same type of basket that they lowered the Apostle Paul in over a wall. Remember that record? This is the exact same kind. This basket is big enough for a man to fit in. The baskets were strong enough to hold 200 pounds. That's what this kind of basket is. And that is a lot of leftovers this time, folks. A lot more. 12 little lunch baskets wouldn't even fill one of those. This is a lot of stuff left over. Now, the religious leaders once again show up after the miracle, just like they do for you when you're starting to change your life, you want to lose weight, you're starting to get in shape. Somebody comes in and talks you out of it. Just killjoys, okay? Buzzkills. You see, people always try to stop you from your promised miracles. Stop letting them. Jesus and the boys get back into the boat again, but somehow they forgot to bring those 7 huge bread-filled baskets. Oops. Oops. Now, Matthew verse 14, it says they'd forgotten to take the bread, and all they had with them was 1 loaf. And Jesus thinks now's a good time to remind them of lesson number 3. Remember lesson number 3 of the 2x2 apostle self-training phase? That's be careful of allowing other people's words into your mind. Be careful who you hang out with. Okay? And so Mark chapter 8, verse 15 and 16, and he charged them saying, take heed. He was ready to teach them something else. Move on. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, is it because we have no bread? Hey, did you bring bread? How come you got? Hey, did you bring the bread? Did you bring it? How come you didn't? Who didn't bring? Who was supposed to put the baskets in here? I brought 1 loaf. Well, that wasn't even what Jesus was talking about. And when he knew it, verse 17, he said to them, why reason ye because ye have no bread? Perceive ye not, neither understand? Have ye your heart yet hardened? Now it's a second time. This time he asks them, after all we've seen and done, are your hearts still hardened? Are you still not open to understand how God can supply the miraculous and can supply or miraculously supply your everyday needs? Jesus talks him through what he remembers. Having eyes ye see, having ears ye hear not. You see, and you do not remember. There's that word remember again. Now this word remember, it's an interesting word. It's a Greek word pneumonuo. And it's where we get our word mnemonics from. Now mnemonics is a memory teaching technique. Memory training technique. It has a connotation of pushing or working our memories hard. Okay? Some of you had classical education. You know what I'm talking about. Jesus is pointing out that for some reason they're not pushing themselves to remember the miraculous. He goes, don't you remember when I broke 5 loaves, verse 19, and fed 5,000? How how many small basket fragments he took up? And they say unto him, 12. And when the 7 among 4,000, you just saw it, how many huge baskets full of fragments you took up? And they said, 7. And he said unto them, how is it that ye do not understand? Understand means put it together. Why are you not putting this stuff together? How is it possible you're still not remembering? Still aren't putting this together? God can supply all your need, physically and miraculously. You need a miracle? Done. You need food, shelter, money? Done. God has already supplied all our need because He is crazy rich. He owns a freaking universe. He's crazy powerful too. And He loves you. If we want to see the miraculous happen more often, if we want to constantly have our need met, if we want this, then all we have to do is remember to be grateful for what God has already done for us. You can't be grateful and hateful. You can't be unthankful and grateful. You can't be needy and grateful. You can't. How do we do that? How do we prepare our hearts for the miraculous? How do we remember? Well, the Greeks, Romans, and Hebrew people were all big into memorizing. It was huge. You see, like us, they use rhymes like we do, like I before E except after C, okay? Things like that. They use rhymes to remember. They use acronyms like we do. USA, LOL, CYA, OMG. You see, they use, it doesn't matter. Songs help them remember. The Jews sang through everything. They had a song for every problem. You see, the Greeks and Romans were particularly fond of something called the Loci system, or the location technique. And it started in about 700 BC. And mental athletes today, the people who can remember a whole deck of cards all mixed up, every single number, they use the Loci method. It could be called the Sherlock Holmes Palace method too. There's a lot of names, but it's the same thing. It's about having a room, you have everything. I'm not going to explain it, okay? You can look it up, okay? I don't have time. Mental athletes today use this system to memorize massive amounts of information. Loci takes a massive amount of self-training. Jesus' boys had gotten lazy since their schoolboy days. They were used to being fishermen. Now they're trying to become an apostle. Moses taught the undisciplined children of Israel how he remembered the miraculous. Was he a miraculous guy or what? You see, in Deuteronomy 6:6-9, look it up sometime, he tells them that in order to enjoy the abundance of the promised land, in order to taste the miraculous, you must teach it, talk it, wear it, write it, and repeat it. Teach it, talk it, wear it, write it, repeat it. Teach it, talk it, wear it, write it, repeat it. You see, you talk about the miraculous in the morning when you get up. When you're out and about, you go to work, you talk about it. When you're eating, you talk about it. When you go to bed, you talk about it. Basically, you think about the goodness of God all the livelong day. And that's how all the Old Testament greats became great. That's what makes you great. Now, I'm going to talk something about a gratitude journal, or I call it a miracle journal. And I want to point out a very easy way to remember. And it's with something you can call a miracle or a gratitude journal. You see? There's not a self-help book out there that doesn't mention gratitude or a gratitude journal. They all talk about it because it works. It works. You can't think about lack when you're thinking about gratitude, because gratitude means you're thankful for something you got, right? Okay? And so the last 2 years of books I've read, and I've read probably about 70 of them already, every one of them talks about gratitude. A gratitude journal. It's a notebook you can write in as many of your past victories as you can remember, and as well as the ones that are about to happen. And it can be like an empty one like this, with just blank pages, lines or no lines, it doesn't matter. It could be one with a zipper and some fancy little quote on the front. You see, it doesn't matter. You can have a zipper if you like zippers. You see, it could be just a college little notebook, okay, like when you studied in high school or something. It can be another little one with lines, and I have a lot of stuff in this one. You see, it could be a spiral notebook if you're a spiral kind of person. It doesn't make any difference. You see, it's just any notebook that you can write past victories down in and write them down. They're always positive. It's never negative. It's not a diary. It's not a dream. It's not a goal book. It's what God has already done for you or what you have done for God, period. And then you read it, and you read it. And this is your journal of the miraculous, the amazing, the funny, the inspiring, the unexpected blessings that happen every day. If every day, 4 times a day like Moses did, you thought about the blessings of God, you think you'd see more blessings? You'd be looking for them. Elaborate in detail in full color speech. Don't generalize. For example, don't write something like, I was stranded in a bad area and God helped me start my car. You're going to go, okay, next. You see, that's boring. Now here's a real incident about God helped me start a car that Joseph reminded me of the other day, and I'm going to write it in my miracle journal or gratitude journal. And it went something like this. A friend of mine who was a school teacher in a very dangerous neighborhood called me and asked if I could help him get his car started. I had to drive about 20 minutes inner city to get there. And he knew if he left it there, it would be stripped by morning. So I did, I went there and I did everything I knew how to do mechanically. It's either gas, electrical, or something mechanical. It's something. You know, it had to be, you see. And I could not get it to start after about 20, 30 minutes. And so I said, I don't know what else to do. And so people started coming to near the parking lot, all these people, and they started standing around the perimeter, and we were like, they weren't real close to us yet. But you could see the whites of their eyes because it was dark now. And I didn't know what else to do. So I said, I'm going to pray. So I prayed out loud for this car like I was going to minister healing to a believer. And I put my hands on the giant radiator. And this car was like something from the 60s. It was like 400 feet long. It's probably 19 feet long, this huge, thick radiator. And I've laid my hands on the radiator. And, you know, and then my friend was standing right next to me. There was nobody in the car. Doors were shut. Nobody's in there. And I started praying. And all of a sudden the starter started turning over. Nobody was turning the key. I wasn't touching anything but the radiator. And then all of a sudden, a mighty roar of a big block V8 engine went vroom, vroom, and it starts gunning, you know, like somebody's pressing on the accelerator. Nobody's in the car. I was a bit freaked out. And I told my friend, I don't know what the hell just happened, but get in there and drive like the wind and let's get the hell out of here. He hopped in, drove it to his house, and I followed him. And once he turned off the car, it never started again. God got us home in miraculous fashion. Write down your miracles in full color, folks. Full expression. Write down your blessings, any great experience, a stranger who blesses you, a song, a poem, or a piece of art that touched you deeply. Tape pictures that bless you in there, or tickets, or wristbands, or mementos. Whatever's going to bless you when you need to be blessed. Write in a verse or a quote that inspired you. Verses are good. You see, relive the blessing in as much detail as you can. It should trigger deep feelings and colorful mental images. It can be any kind of notebook like I mentioned earlier. And read it whenever you need that pick-me-up. It forces you to pay attention to the good that happens to you and your one and only life. It reminds you of your string of victories, and all of you have them. All of you have them. It will increase your believing by returning your heart to its natural state, which is a heart that's ready to receive the total abundance of God and a multitude of miracles. It will remind you that God has always and will always continue to supply your need. It'll remind you that because what you've seen and done, and you can do it over and over again. So when you're ready to see more signs, miracles, and wonders than you do right now, then the action I want you to take to unharden your heart is to begin your miracle journal or your gratitude journal. The benefit to you will be that all your physical need will begin to be supplied like you really wanted, and you will be seeing and doing more miracles than you have ever done before. Let's unharden our hearts, folks, by obtaining a miraculous attitude of gratitude. God bless.